Hey guys, tonight we're heading back to a time when the sky was smoky, the neighbors were nosy, and your job involved swinging a hammer at red-hot metal for 12 hours a day while trying not to light your own pants on fire. Yep, we're diving into the singed and sweaty world of the Colonial Blacksmith. It's noisy, it's hot, it's stressful, and spoiler alert, you're probably going to burn yourself before lunch. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, leave a comment to tell me your city and what time it is right now. I always love seeing who's joining from where. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up with the sun, because you're not just the town blacksmith, you're also the town's unofficial alarm clock. Your workshop's located at the edge of a muddy road, just far enough from the town square to avoid complaints, but close enough that everyone can still find you when their wagon wheel falls off or their oven door breaks for the third time this month. The forge greets you with yesterday's ashes and a faint smell of regret. It's a one-room structure, all timber and soot, with a dirt floor, an anvil that never quite sits level, and a workbench that doubles as your lunch table. The hearth is already cold, which means you'll need to relight it, a process that involves kindling, flint, blowing air through your lungs until you feel dizzy, and the kind of muttering usually reserved for losing at cards. Once the fire's going, the temperature climbs fast. It's still early morning, and you're already sweating through your coarse linen shirt. You feed the flames with charcoal, listening to it hiss and crackle like it has opinions. Your first task? Sharpening a scythe for the innkeeper's cousin. It's chipped, bent, and possibly cursed. You heat it until it glows orange, hammer it flat on the anvil, and try not to get distracted by the sparks flying past your face. The hammer rings against the metal in a rhythm you know by heart. Strike, turn, strike, cool. You barely notice the black streaks forming across your arms, the flecks of soot settling in your eyebrows. This is your daily routine, and it's not glamorous. But it is necessary. In colonial towns, blacksmiths weren't just handy, they were essential. You're the one who keeps doors on hinges, horses on roads, and farmers from shouting at broken plows. And there aren't many of you. Which means if something breaks, it's your problem. If something might break, someone brings it, just in case. And if something has nothing to do with you whatsoever, they still might wander into your shop because you seem like someone who knows things. Your hands already ache, and you haven't even started the wagon axles stacked in the corner. You take a deep breath and grab your tongs, which are too hot to touch but too necessary to ignore. You're working with wrought iron, common, durable, and temperamental. The trick is not overheating it. The other trick is not underheating it. The actual trick is pretending you know what you're doing while quietly praying the metal behaves today. Out front, a dog is barking at a chicken. Someone yells about taxes. You try to stay focused. Your sleeves are rolled up, your boots are coated in dust, and your face looks like you've been in a mild explosion. Which, technically, you have been. Twice. Small ones. And still, there's something satisfying about it. That moment when the metal glows just right. When the hammer hits square. When the shape forms beneath your hand, solid and true. But historians still debate how skilled colonial blacksmiths actually were. Some say they were highly trained craftsmen, able to make everything from rifles to fiddles. Others argue many were self-taught or semi-trained, using trial and error more than technique. The truth probably lies somewhere in between, equal parts practice, muscle memory, and good old-fashioned guesswork. As the morning drags into midday, your shirt sticks to your back. Your hair is damp. You've got 3 blisters, a slightly singed beard, and a faint taste of ash in your mouth. You pause to sip water that's warm and vaguely metallic. The jug you drink from is also your hammer rest. Don't judge. And through all this, you know one thing for sure. You'll be back here tomorrow, doing it all again. Because being a colonial blacksmith might be hell. But somebody's got to keep the town from falling apart. You don't ease into the heat, it punches you in the face. By mid-morning, the forge feels like you're standing in a bread oven that's also a chimney and somehow a sauna. The air is thick, hot, and uncooperative. You wave a rag in front of your face, but it just moves the heat around like you're politely rearranging a firestorm. Colonial forges weren't exactly known for comfort. Yours is made of brick, stone, and sheer willpower, with a chimney that kind of works if the wind's in the right direction. You stoke the hearth with blackened hands, using bellows so massive they look like they belong in a cathedral. They wheeze and sigh as you pump them, pushing air into the blaze until it roars like a dragon with a toothache. The temperature climbs above 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit. That's hot enough to make iron pliable, and your eyebrows reconsider their life choices. Your face burns, your arms are slick with sweat, and your feet feel like they're standing on a stove. And this is a cool day. In summer, it gets worse. The heat inside the forge and the sun outside team up like old enemies who've made peace just long enough to destroy you. There's no breeze, no shade, just sweat dripping from your nose onto red-hot metal. And if you dare step outside to cool off, you're greeted by mosquitoes, dust, and the ever-present smell of livestock. You once tried to bring a bucket of water to splash your face. It boiled. Winter isn't much better. Sure, the forge keeps you warm, but too warm. You freeze walking in, melt within 5 minutes, then freeze again the moment you step out to relieve yourself behind the shed. Your body doesn't know what season it is anymore. Neither do your knees. And you can't take breaks. Not really. Iron doesn't wait. If you walk away for too long, the piece you're working on cools down and gets ruined. Then you have to start over. And that means more bellows, more sweat, more blistered fingers and silent muttering. It's not just physical exhaustion, it's mental, too. You have to judge temperature by color: straw yellow for light forging, orange for shaping, white for welding. You don't have thermometers. You have your eyes, your instincts, and the growing suspicion that one day, you might hallucinate a talking horseshoe. Some blacksmiths in the colonies managed to apprentice under trained European masters, but many learned through brute trial and error. You learn to tell when iron's ready by the way it sounds, by the way it smells. Yes, hot iron has a smell, sharp, mineral, and a little bit like burning pennies. But even with experience, the forge is a fickle beast. Some days it behaves. Other days it turns on you for no reason, like a cat in a bad mood. And then there's the issue of ventilation. Some workshops had open windows, or a door propped ajar. Yours has neither, just one window that sticks shut and a ceiling vent that creaks like it's haunted. The smoke clings to everything. Your clothes, your teeth, your dreams. You've taken to wetting a rag and tying it around your neck. It dries within minutes. You once tried tying one around your head, but it slipped mid-swing and you almost hammered your own thumb. Lesson learned. No one really talks about this part of blacksmithing: the swampy discomfort, the endless thirst, the feeling of being roasted from the inside out. History books mention the craftsmanship, the community importance, the noble skill. They don't mention the sweaty panic of accidentally touching the wrong part of the anvil with your bare wrist. There's a debated theory among historians that colonial blacksmiths enjoyed their work because it offered stability and status. And maybe some did. But in this moment, as the fire spits, your boots squelch, and your shoulders twitch with heat-induced rage, you're not feeling particularly proud. You're just trying not to pass out. You lean on your hammer and breathe, short, shallow gulps that taste like charcoal. You glance at the door, where the sunlight glows invitingly. You wonder if it's cooler out there. You wonder if anyone's invented a job that doesn't involve flames. Then someone knocks, holding a rusted plow blade and saying, "Sorry to trouble you, but could you just?" You smile because you have to. And then you step back into the fire. You pick up the hammer again. It's your favorite one, not because it's comfortable, but because it only gives you wrist pain in one arm instead of both. The head's a little chipped, the handle's wrapped in leather that's seen better centuries, and the whole thing is slightly crooked. But like most things in your shop, it works. Mostly. The plow blade from your last customer sits on the anvil, warped and rusted. You've already reheated it twice. It's stubborn, misshapen, and doesn't seem particularly interested in becoming useful again. You tap it once to test the resistance. It clinks. You tap again. Harder. Sparks fly. This is how your day will go. Colonial blacksmithing is a test of endurance, yes, but also one of focus. You're not just swinging metal like a heroic cartoon character. You're shaping, angling, folding, correcting. Every strike must land where it's supposed to. And if you miss, well, there goes a week's work. Or your knuckles. You take a deep breath, tighten your grip, and swing. The clang echoes through the shop, bouncing off wooden beams and landing somewhere near your left ear. You adjust the piece with iron tongs, still hot, still heavier than necessary, and swing again. The vibration shoots up your forearm and into your shoulder. You grunt, mostly to yourself. Then comes the thing no one warns you about, the ricochet. Because sometimes, the metal bites back. Maybe the angle was wrong. Maybe the edge was too thin. Maybe the metal just decided it hated you. Whatever the reason, a tiny shard breaks off and flies directly past your head. You don't flinch. You've been here before. One time a nail ricocheted into your tea. You drank it anyway. It was fine. Tool injuries are part of the trade. So are burns, bruises, blackened fingernails, and the occasional mystery welt. You keep a bucket of water nearby, not just to cool metal, but to stick your hand in when you misjudge something and touch the anvil like it's not a slab of pure heat. Your fingers are calloused. Your palms are cracked. You once tore a glove and didn't notice for 2 hours until you realized the pain in your thumb wasn't philosophical, it was literal. You wrap it in cloth and keep going. The tools themselves are heavy, awkward, and slightly unhinged. Hammers, tongs, chisels, punches, swages, fullers, each with a name that sounds like it belongs in a 17th century pub brawl. You store them in wooden racks, though somehow they always end up on the floor when you need them most. There's also the mysterious disappearance of tools. Every blacksmith experiences it. 1 minute, your flat-headed hammer is right there. The next, it's gone, and no amount of shouting will bring it back. Some say the tools migrate. Others say apprentices borrow them and forget. You say nothing, but you glare at the cat. And let's not forget the coal dust. It clings to your skin, your tools, your bread, your hair. You once blew your nose and thought you were dying, until you remembered you've been inhaling forge residue since dawn. Still, you keep swinging. Because if you don't finish this plow, the farmer won't be able to work his field. And if the farmer doesn't work his field, he won't have grain to trade. And if there's no grain, there's no flour. And then the baker complains. And then the town gets grumpy. And then they all come knocking on your door again. Historians often note that blacksmiths were central to colonial economies. They built tools, repaired weapons, and kept daily life clanking along. What's debated, though, is just how specialized their work really was. Some smiths became farriers, specializing in horseshoes. Others focused on locks, nails, or even kitchenware. But most, like you, were generalists, jacks of all flaming trades. You pause, wipe your forehead, and lean against the workbench. Your ears are still ringing. Your arm aches. You've got soot in your mouth and an unidentified bruise on your shin. You wonder briefly what it would be like to be a town crier. Sure, your throat would hurt, but at least you wouldn't need tongs. Then someone knocks again. Hey, they call out. Do you do hinges? Of course you do hinges. You sigh. You swing. And the day clangs on. You smell yourself before anyone else does. It hits you around mid-afternoon, usually when you pause to stretch and catch a warm, smoky breeze straight off your own collar. You don't even flinch anymore. You've made peace with the fact that you now smell like a roasted onion who's had a long day. Being a colonial blacksmith means living in a constant swirl of fire, ash, sweat, and iron dust. And unlike the fancy folks who powder their wigs and spritz themselves with rosewater, you don't have the luxury of staying clean. Your soap is homemade and slightly abrasive. Your wash basin is shared with your tools. Your shirt, once white, is now the color of historically accurate grime. By some cruel twist of fate, your sense of smell hasn't dulled. You can identify burnt leather at 20 paces, and you know instantly when someone left a horseshoe in the fire too long. But the one smell you can't escape is your own. Your apron is the worst offender. It's a thick, scorched hide that carries the memories of every burn, every spill, and at least 3 very bad days involving hot nails and cold soup. And yet, you keep wearing it. Because you have to. It's part of your armor. Sweating through your clothes is a daily guarantee. You've stopped counting how many shirts you've ruined. You once tried to dry one on a hook near the forge and ended up with something resembling a shriveled parchment scroll. Even your boots, sturdy, expensive, and technically waterproof, have developed a smell that you suspect might be legally classified as aggressive. Bathing is a luxury. Sure, there's the river, but it's cold, full of frogs, and also where people wash their clothes, their horses, and occasionally themselves. You once bathed in a barrel behind your shop, but that ended abruptly when the local constable wandered past and asked if you were cooking something alive. No, just yourself. And then there's the food situation. You eat near the forge, because that's where you live now. You've got a small table off to the side with a tin plate, a wooden spoon, and a constant layer of ash no matter how many times you wipe it down. Your meals are humble: thick bread, some salt pork, a boiled potato if you're lucky. And no matter what you eat, it ends up tasting faintly of smoke. You once had a plum that tasted like charcoal. You didn't question it. On rare occasions, you visit the tavern for a real meal. You sit quietly in a corner, trying to ignore the glances from townsfolk who've clearly never stood next to an open fire for 6 hours. One child once whispered to his mother, "He smells like a chimney with feelings." Accurate. And yet, oddly, no one complains. Not really. Because you're the blacksmith. They might wrinkle their noses, but they still bring their busted hinges, their bent shovels, their cracked fireplace pokers. You're necessary. Even if you smell like burnt bacon wrapped in leather. Interestingly, some historians debate how often colonial workers truly bathed. Records suggest personal hygiene varied wildly by region, season, and class. What's agreed upon is this: people noticed smells. And blacksmiths, with their smoke-filled shops and molten workloads, were basically walking barbecues. You once tried dabbing vinegar on your wrists, just to see if it helped. It didn't. It just made you smell like a smoky salad. So now you embrace it. The smell, the sweat, the smudges. You are a human forge. A living fireplace. A mildly flammable problem solver. You wipe your hands on a rag so dirty it should have voting rights, grab your water jug, and take a deep breath. Smells like another long day. You're elbow deep in soot, halfway through reshaping a stubborn door latch, when the preacher's son arrives with the usual polite smile and the most cursed sentence you hear on a daily basis. "Hi. My father was wondering if you could just fix this real quick." It's never quick. And it's never just one thing. As the town blacksmith, you're expected to know how to fix everything. Not just nails, hinges, and horseshoes, but also tools you've never seen, parts for wagons made by someone who clearly hated geometry, and one time, memorably, a music box that sounded wrong when sad. You're the town's last line of defense against mechanical chaos. And you're also the only one around with a forge. In colonial towns, blacksmiths were indispensable. You kept the economy turning, literally by making wheels, but also metaphorically, by crafting the metal bits and bobs that held the entire community together. If something moved, clanged, or stayed attached to anything else, it probably came through your forge. Today's to-do list? A 2 plow blades, both bent. Or a shovel handle that no longer speaks to the shovel head. A 3 badly rusted horseshoes. And someone who claims their fireplace tongs have developed a leftward bias. You stare at the pile and wonder what life would have been like as a cobbler. Or a cheese merchant. Someone with a chair. And the thing is, people don't wait politely. You get interruptions while eating, while hammering, even while wiping the sweat out of your eyes with a sleeve that hasn't been cleaned since last Tuesday. Sometimes they bring gifts, bread, firewood, even socks. Sometimes they bring nothing but urgency. There's no official appointment system. It's whoever walks in first, shouts the loudest, or has the most desperate look in their eyes. You do your best. You nod, scribble names on a charcoal board, and organize your workload like a blacksmith-shaped librarian. But iron doesn't care about your schedule. If it breaks during forging, it sets you back an hour. If the temperature drops, your bellows have to work twice as hard. If someone asks you to just take a quick look at their wagon axle, congratulations, you're working through dinner. And because you're the blacksmith, people assume you can also file their keys, shape their candle holders, repair their fireplace tools, reattach the iron legs on their chicken coop, which, for some reason, has legs. You once spent an entire afternoon reshaping a frying pan someone had tried to turn into a gong. History books love to romanticize this part of the trade. Blacksmith as artisan, central figure, respected craftsman. And sure, there's truth in that. But there's another truth. Being the only person in town who understands how metal works means you never get to stop. What makes it worse is that your materials aren't always reliable. Iron is expensive. Coal runs out. Tools break. You once spent a week trying to finish a batch of nails using a hammer with a wobbly head and one good glove. And don't even get started on bartering. Someone once tried to pay you with a goose and half a jar of jam. You sigh, wipe your hands on your apron, and take a look at the broken tongs with bias. The hinge is bent. The alignment's off. You could probably fix it in 15 minutes, if no one else interrupts. Which, of course, means you're interrupted 6 minutes in by someone shouting, "Do you do weather vanes?" You mutter something impolite under your breath and go back to work. Because in this town, you're not just the blacksmith. You're the one person who can make things work. And no matter how much smoke's in your eyes or how many people are knocking at your door, you keep swinging. Because if you stop, even for a moment, everything might fall apart. The forge is roaring again, and so are your thoughts. You've been hammering the same wagon spoke for what feels like an hour. It's warped, cracked, and definitely not cooperating. You reheat it, adjust your grip, and try again. The hammer bounces back like it's judging you. You grunt. The spoke doesn't respond. But you're not giving up. This is what it's like being a blacksmith who also happens to be the only metal solution provider within a 10-mile radius. The work is never done, and most days, it feels like the iron is winning. Your tools are everywhere. Tongs, fullers, chisels, each of them slightly duller than they were last week. Your hands ache. Your elbow feels like it's made of gravel. And you swear your shoulder now makes a clicking sound when you lift anything heavier than a potato. Your current task is a wagon axle. It's rusted, bent, and probably cursed. The customer said, "It just needs a little straightening." You smiled politely, nodded, and tried not to scream. Because nothing in blacksmithing ever just needs a little. Every item you work on is either too brittle, too thick, or too mysterious. And every time you think you're ahead, something breaks. Supply issues don't help. Charcoal deliveries are late. Your iron stockpile is half the size it should be. You used the last of your good rivets on a milk churn repair for a family who paid you in pickles and enthusiastic thanks. It's hard not to feel the stress build. You used to imagine blacksmithing as noble. Powerful arms, glowing steel, a crowd of admirers nodding in appreciation. Reality is sore joints, smoke in your eyes, and someone asking if you can make the hinge just squeak a little less. There's no official break room. You sit on a stump outside, chewing on cold bread and staring at your forge like it owes you money. You think about leaving sometimes, maybe heading west, finding a quieter town, opening a shop where people pay in actual coin and say please. But then again, you'd probably still be fixing plows. Historians like to say blacksmiths were pillars of colonial society, respected for their strength and utility. But few mention the burnout. The constant pressure to produce, perform, and never show weakness. You're a one-person factory. There's no safety net. No sick days. You once worked through a fever just to finish a batch of nails for a wedding barn. Your mental strategy now involves tricking yourself into doing things. Just fix this one blade, you whisper. Then it becomes another. Then another. By the time you realize how much work you've done, your knees have locked up and your hair smells like you've been slow roasted over irony. And yes, sometimes you talk to the metal. Out loud. It helps. You swing again, this time with more force than finesse. The hammer lands true, the spoke shifts slightly, and you breathe a small sigh of victory. Not because it's done, but because it's doing something. A neighbor walks past and calls out, "You must love it in there. Always warm." You nod and smile. You do not explain the emotional consequences of hammering a broken shovel for the 4th time in one day. Instead, you keep working. Not because it's easy, not because you're inspired, but because stopping means facing the terrifying mountain of unfinished repairs in the corner. You glance at them. They stare back. The fire flares behind you. The wagon spoke finally sits right. And you tell yourself, just one more. Just one more. Lunch is technically a concept, not a guarantee. You eat when the fire allows it. When the metal cools just long enough for you to sit on the stool by the wall and shove something vaguely edible into your mouth. Today's meal is cold stew in a tin bowl, eaten with a wooden spoon that might also double as a stirring rod if needed. You chew quickly, because you have exactly 10 minutes before the blade in the forge hits the wrong shade of orange and turns your whole morning into a do-over. That's the rhythm of a colonial blacksmith's day. Heat, hammer, sweat, swallow. Repeat. There's no dining room, no kitchen break, no comfortable corner to read the news. Your dining table is your workbench. The napkin is your sleeve. Sometimes the lunch is your sleeve, depending on how badly the stew spills. Occasionally, if you're lucky, someone drops off bread or dried meat as a thank you. You appreciate the gesture, even if the bread is tougher than your apron and the meat tastes like it once had opinions. And you eat near the forge, always. That's the only way to keep an eye on the metal. You've tried walking out once for a break under the tree. Came back 5 minutes later to find a batch of nails ruined, your cat asleep on your tongs, and a kid poking the bellows asking if he could make lightning. The fire never sleeps. So neither do you, not properly. By mid-afternoon, you're not tired. You're heat drunk. Everything feels fuzzy and slow. You catch yourself staring at the glowing coal a bit too long, hypnotized by its hiss and shimmer. You snap out of it, shake your head, and splash tepid water on your face from a bucket that's seen better days, and better water. You once tried adding mint leaves to the water for refreshment. The mint cooked. The result smelled like herbal regret. Your clothes are heavy with sweat. Your apron clings to your knees. You shift your feet and realize you've been standing in the same spot for so long, your boot soles have molded slightly into the dirt. You are becoming part of the forge. Dinner, when it arrives, is usually no better than lunch. A bowl of porridge, or beans if someone remembered. If you're lucky, a cup of cider to wash it down and convince your hands to unclench. Food historians still argue about what colonial blacksmiths ate. Some say they had hearty meals from the community as thanks. Others suggest most ate whatever they could scrounge between jobs. Either way, the common thread is speed and soot. Everything tastes like smoke eventually. Once, you bit into an apple and realized you had a small coal smudge on your thumb. The apple tasted faintly of iron. You kept eating it. You were too tired to care. And despite all this, you still try to find 5 minutes, just 5, to lean back against the doorframe, eyes closed, sun on your face, and pretend you're somewhere cooler. Somewhere quieter. Maybe under a tree. Maybe by a stream. Maybe working a job that doesn't involve holding molten metal and hoping it doesn't explode in your hand. But the fire crackles. The tongs rattle. And you go back to work. Because in this life, even rest has to be earned with burns. You finish repairing a rusted latch, brush ash off your pants, and open the tiny drawer where you keep your coins. You laugh. There are 3 of them. 2 are chipped. 1 might not even be real. You jiggle them in your palm like maybe shaking them will multiply them. They do not. They just clink sadly. Because here's the thing about being a colonial blacksmith. You do a lot of work, but you don't see a lot of money. In theory, your services are essential. In practice, people pay you in firewood, turnips, jars of pickles, or just emotional gratitude. You once got paid with a live chicken. It lived in your shop for 3 days before escaping during a particularly dramatic shoeing. You sigh, close the drawer, and look at your ledger. It's half full of IOUs and vague promises like, "We'll pay you after harvest," or "Can offer goat in spring." Some customers pay with silver, sure, but they're rare, and they usually want impossible things like 3 iron hinges by sunrise or a sword for decorative use that still feels deadly. The colonial economy isn't exactly smooth. Barter is common. Credit is loose. And actual coins? Scarce. The kind of scarce that makes you consider whether the goose someone offered you in exchange for a scythe blade might be worth more as soup than savings. You think briefly about raising your prices. But every time you try, someone explains their cart broke down, their cousin is sick, or they just really didn't expect iron to be so complicated. Still, you can't say no. Not really. Because if the town goes without you, the whole thing starts to unravel. Doors unhinge, carts collapse, and eventually, someone will try to fix a hinge themselves and break 3 fingers. So you keep going. You work through the unpaid jobs, hoping they lead to the paying ones. You track who still owes you, Mr. Weaver, for horseshoes and 1 rake head, Mrs. Grant, 2 ladles and a bed frame pin. You wonder if her ladle is still functioning. You wonder if she's using a stick. Economic historians still debate how financially stable blacksmiths were. Some argue they did well. After all, everyone needed them. Others believe they struggled, constantly caught between utility and undercompensation. The truth. You're living it. You once spent 3 full days repairing a broken harrow for a farmer who brought you a whole ham in return. You were vegetarian for a month after that, not by choice, but because ham was the only thing in your pantry. You named it. You regretted that. And it's not like you don't have expenses. You need iron, charcoal, new tools, replacement gloves, plus repairs when your chimney collapses again, or your roof leaks directly onto the bellows. You keep a box labeled emergency nails that's now empty except for a paperclip and a beetle. Sometimes, to make ends meet, you do side work, making nails in bulk, shaping basic tools for traveling merchants, even crafting decorative items, hooks, candle holders, fancy hinges. These are easier to sell, but harder to justify when your anvil is calling your name and there's a pile of repairs looming. And then there's the guilt. If you say no, someone suffers. If you say yes, you do. It's a constant exchange, a balancing act between community and exhaustion. You lean against the doorframe, watching a trader pass by on horseback. He jingles as he rides. Coins, probably. Or keys to a chest of coins. You'll never know. Back inside, you grab your tools again. There's a broken spade handle on the bench and a door hinge that squeaks when no one's touching it. The fire flares. Your stomach growls. You pick up your hammer and mutter, "Let's earn ourselves another turnip." You weren't always the one holding the hammer. Once, not so long ago, you were the one sweeping the floor, fetching the coal, and getting blamed when someone tripped over a misplaced tong. You were the apprentice, wide-eyed, underfed, and perpetually confused. And if we're being honest, parts of you still are. Apprenticeship in colonial blacksmithing wasn't some cozy mentorship with weekly feedback and personal growth. It was more like a long, sweaty hazing ritual where the lesson was usually, don't die, try again. You started young. Most did. Parents sent their sons, and occasionally daughters, to smiths in the hopes they'd learn a trade. You showed up with a bundle of clothes, calloused hands from farm work, and exactly zero idea what you were walking into. Your first job? Holding things. Then heating things. Then pumping bellows. Then trying not to drop the tongs when the iron glowed a bit too brightly and everyone in the room yelled at once. You fetched water. You swept ashes. You scrubbed tools that didn't look dirty, but weren't sitting right. You woke up early. You stayed late. You got burned. A lot. And the blacksmith you worked under? A good teacher, maybe, but also grumpy, tired, and operating under the belief that shouting was just firm instruction. Once, you asked a question about hammer angles. He handed you a ruined horseshoe and said, "Figure it out." You did. Eventually. Today, you're the one shouting. Gently. Usually. You've got an apprentice of your own, a wiry kid named Jonas who's learning how to swing a hammer and how not to flinch when the sparks fly. He forgets where tools are. He burns things that shouldn't be burned. He once tried to cool down a red-hot iron rod inside her. But he's learning. And you recognize the look in his eyes, that blend of terror, awe, and constant hunger. Historically, apprenticeships varied in length, some as short as 4 years, others closer to 7. Some ended with a formal agreement, others just faded into partnership. What they all had in common was repetition. Long days, sore hands, and a slow transformation from clueless helper to competent smith. But there's a blurry line between training and, well, torment. You remember the day your master let you try a real horseshoe. You were so proud. You overheated it. It bent wrong. You cried, quietly, behind the coal sack. He said nothing, but the next day, he let you try again. That's how praise worked. Now, watching Jonas struggle with his first chisel cut, you take a deep breath and say, "Not bad." It's more praise than you ever got. He lights up like you just handed him a bag of silver. And in that moment, you realize something. As hard as this life is, someone gave you the space to mess up and try again. Someone let you burn the corner of a table and still come back the next day. Someone handed you a hammer and, eventually, stepped back. Now you're doing the same. You return to the forge and show Jonas how to angle the piece correctly, how to listen to the ring of the metal, how to trust that he's allowed to fail without the shop burning down. Well, probably. He smiles. You nod. And for a second, you remember why you stayed in this job at all. You don't even hear the gossip anymore, until it mentions your name. You're at the market, quietly trying to trade a bundle of nails for a wedge of cheese that doesn't squeak when you chew it, when 2 women near the bakery glance your way. "That's him," one says, lowering her voice only slightly. "The blacksmith. Sleeps in his shop," they say. "Talks to his tools," the other adds. You smile politely. You do, in fact, talk to your tools. Because when your entire job is swinging iron in solitude, a little conversation, even with a hammer, keeps you sane. The truth is, blacksmiths have always been seen as a bit strange. Not just in colonial towns, but across centuries and cultures. You work alone, surrounded by noise, fire, and smoke. You wear a leather apron that smells like a thunderstorm in a barn. You show up at the tavern with soot on your forehead and iron shavings in your beard. Of course people talk. And oh, they love to talk. Doesn't go to church enough. Swears in Latin. Once made a weather vane shaped like a pig and insisted it was functional art. Yes, that was you. You're not trying to be mysterious. You're just tired. Always tired. Your job demands precision, patience, and an iron stomach for both heat and community expectations. And the village? It's small. Everyone knows everyone. If you sleep in too late, someone assumes you're sick. If you work too late, someone assumes you're summoning spirits. You once stayed quiet during supper and were promptly told you were in danger of melancholia. You were just chewing. There's a strange divide here. People need you, but they also don't quite understand you. They know you fix their carts, forge their hinges, shape the nails that hold up their homes. But they also keep their distance, like maybe the fire seeped into your soul. Folklore doesn't help. In some places, blacksmiths were rumored to be a little too close to magic. Fire, metal, transformation, it's the stuff of myths. Some say you can whisper to the flames. Others say your hammer rings differently on Sundays. One child once told you he thought you could make swords that only work for worthy hands. You told him you mostly make ladles. But still, the rumors swirl. You've heard people say your forge is haunted, that your tools move when your back is turned, that you haven't aged in a decade. You chuckle at that one while flexing your sore knees. Sometimes, when the gossip gets too loud, you retreat into your work. The forge is predictable. Iron doesn't care what people say. It just wants to be shaped. And when you're deep into a project, focused, moving, sweating, the world fades out. No whispers. No side glances. Just the rhythm of the hammer and the breath of the fire. Historians have noted this social distance in records. Blacksmiths were essential but rarely central. Neither peasants nor gentry. Somewhere in between. A little too noisy for the parlors. A little too smoky for the sermons. But even if people don't always understand you, they do respect you. They show up with broken things. They return when you fix them. And yes, sometimes they ask if you sleep in your apron. You don't. Mostly. Back at your forge, you wipe your hands on your trousers, look around, and smile just a little. Because for all the strange looks, for all the village chatter, you still get to do something real. Something that clangs. Something that works. And if they want to believe you talk to your hammer, well, you just might. The sky darkens, not because it's evening, but because it's raining. You feel the first drop as a cold tap on the back of your neck while you're bent over a half-finished gate latch. You glance up. Clouds. Thick, gray, and smug. You sigh. Not because you dislike rain, but because rain, for a blacksmith, is less a weather event and more of a day ruiner. It starts slow. A few lazy drops. You try to ignore it. You keep hammering, shoulders hunched, jaw set. Then comes the wind. Then the sheets of water. Then the slow realization that your roof is leaking again, right above the workbench. You drag your tools to a dry corner. The anvil gets a blanket. The bellows get a scowl. You mutter about roof repairs you can't afford and patch jobs that never hold. The forge hisses, steam rising from the coals like it's exhaling frustration on your behalf. Water is the enemy of everything in your shop. It rusts your tools, dampens your fuel, and warps your wooden handles. Even the floor turns against you, slick mud where you once stood solid. You nearly slip on a dropped hammer and only just catch yourself on a barrel of nails, which now smells like wet iron and bad decisions. There's no proper drainage. No gutter system. Just buckets. So many buckets. You've labeled them out of boredom, left drip, ceiling doom, and splash zone. You move them into place like soldiers. You've been here before. The real problem, though, is what happens after the rain. Moisture clings to everything. You try to dry your tongs, but the cloth tears. Your coal smokes more than it burns. The iron cools too fast, becomes brittle, cracks when struck. You waste hours redoing work you already finished. The worst part. The customers don't care. They want their hinges and plows and pokers now. Rain is your problem. You remember once trying to work through a storm. The forge flared. The roof gave way. You lost a whole day's worth of tools to rust overnight. You swore you'd never do it again. But here you are, again, coaxing damp iron back into shape and hoping your hammer doesn't fly from your slick grip like a vengeful crow. Some blacksmiths in wetter regions built covered forges, attached sheds, even stone chimneys with clever vents. You have a tarpaulin and hope. Historians argue whether colonial smiths adapted well to the elements. Some did. Some didn't. Most just endured, drying their tools beside the fire and grumbling into their soup. Speaking of soup, it's watery. Literally. Your lunch is now rain-enhanced. You sip it anyway. The day drips on. You try to stay dry. You fail. Even your clothes have turned against you. Your shirt is soaked. Your apron is twice its normal weight. Your boots squelch when you walk. You swear you heard your anvil sigh. And yet, You keep going. Because rain doesn't stop the work. It just makes it more miserable. You finish the latch, wrap it in cloth, and set it by the door. It's not perfect. Nothing in the rain ever is. But it'll hold. You look up at the ceiling. A fresh drip hits your nose. You mutter something unprintable and go grab another bucket. The customer is frowning. Not the kind of frown that means, I don't like it, but the one that says, I have no idea what I'm looking at, but I'm going to be difficult anyway. You've just handed over a repaired poker with a polished brass handle, your third job of the morning, and already you can tell, this is going to be a sparks will fly kind of day. The forge isn't just a place of fire and metal. It's also a magnet for personalities. Every day, someone wanders in with a request, a complaint, or a suggestion for how you could do things a bit quicker. Sometimes they come in pairs. Sometimes they come with opinions. Today's lineup. Or a farmer who insists you've tightened the plow too well. Or a traveling merchant asking if you can make his iron sign less shiny but also more noticeable. And, of course, the preacher, who's convinced your forge has too much noise for a moral profession. You nod. You smile. You do not scream. Because managing people is part of the job, a part no one warned you about. You thought you'd be spending your days shaping iron, not navigating gossip chains, social rivalries, and the occasional neighbor feud over whose shovel is more historically accurate. Your shop has become a meeting place, a debate hall, a complaint center. And somehow, you're in the middle of it all, holding a glowing iron bar and pretending you didn't hear someone say, he probably put spells in the nails. There was one incident, mildly famous now, where two customers argued so loudly about who arrived first that you gave them each half a horseshoe and told them to settle it with a race. They did. The town still talks about it. Then there's the matter of rival smiths. Well, Smith, singular, James. James works in the next town over. He's younger, less experienced, but he's loud, and he owns a cart, so he travels, making surprise visits to villages like yours. He calls it on-demand craftsmanship. You call it showing up uninvited with smug energy and suspiciously uniform nails. People compare you. Of course they do. James says he can fix this in half the time. James makes prettier hinges. James offered me a set of matching fireplace tools. You smile, politely, then return to shaping the tool that won't fall apart after one cold winter. Some folks defend you. Loyal customers. The baker. The elderly innkeeper with the broken elbow and the perfect memory. They say things like, he's slower, but the work's better, which is both flattering and mildly insulting. But nothing stings more than when they suggest your forge is a little intimidating. The noise, the fire, the smell, the fact that you wear a heavy apron and scowl when thinking. It's not personal. You're just focused. Still, you've tried softening your image. You once tied a ribbon to the bellows. It caught fire. Lesson learned. And then there's the preacher. He visits once a month to bless the forge. Or at least that's what he says. Mostly he stands in the doorway and offers unsolicited commentary. So much heat. So much pounding. It all seems a bit primal, doesn't it? You resist the urge to hand him a hammer and invite him to try for himself. Because what they don't see is the quiet skill. The way you angle the metal. The way your ears catch the pitch of the strike. The way your fingers feel when something is finally, properly shaped. They don't know the hours, the burns, the repetitions. They only know the clang, the fire, and the occasional bit of smoke drifting out the roof. So you keep smiling. You keep hammering. And when James shows up again, casually mentioning how he finishes his horseshoes in half the time, you simply hand him a piece of your work, flawless, balanced, gleaming. And you let the sparks answer for you. It hits you hardest at dusk. Not the heat, not the noise, not even the steady stream of last-minute customers who all swear their emergency, can't wait till morning. No, what hits you is the pain. Deep, slow, and permanent. The kind that sinks into your bones like smoke into cloth. You bend to pick up a stray iron rod and your back cracks like an old door hinge. Your fingers throb with a dull ache that started 2 years ago and never really left. Your knees protest when you crouch. Your shoulders creak when you lift. And your neck. Let's just say it's developed a permanent lean to the left. Artistic, maybe. Functional? Not so much. Being a colonial blacksmith means being in a long-term relationship with physical deterioration. The forge doesn't just wear down metal. It wears down you. You've built up a tolerance, sure. Calluses so thick they have their own weather system. Forearms like overcooked loaves of bread. You can carry a bucket of nails in each hand and still open a door with your elbow. But strength doesn't mean immunity. You've hammered so many times that your wrists buzz even when you're not working. You sometimes wake up and realize your hand is still twitching in your sleep, mimicking a swing. One morning, you had a dream about forging a perfect horseshoe, only to wake up gripping your blanket like a set of tongs. And let's not even talk about your hearing. Between the clanging metal, the roaring fire, and the occasional customer who thinks yelling helps things go faster, your ears have surrendered. You now live in a constant background hum of forge tinnitus. That high-pitched ring. It's not a bell. It's your reward for 15 years of service. There are no painkillers. No chiropractors. Just herbs, homemade balms, and a vague hope that if you sleep on your right side, the ache will shift somewhere less critical. You once tried using willow bark for joint pain. It sort of helped. You also fell asleep in your chair and woke up with a boot mark on your thigh from your own apprentice. Less helpful. Historians occasionally romanticize the blacksmith's physique, brawny, rugged, the embodiment of colonial masculinity. What they skip over is the chronic inflammation, the joint stiffness, and the fact that you now grunt like an old ship every time you stand. And then there are your hands. Once nimble, now stiff. You can still grip the hammer, but finer tasks, engraving, delicate curves, take twice as long. You dropped a nail yesterday and had to use your foot to scoop it up like a tired pelican. It wasn't graceful. Jonas laughed. You laughed too, just to keep him from seeing the wince. Still, you push on. Because who else will do this? Who else knows the weight of a hinge just by lifting it? Who else can bend an axle with precision, forge a blade without a seam, or recognize the perfect heat by the color alone? The forge gives you pride, even as it takes your posture. Your skill has come at a price, but it's your skill. Hard-earned, flame-forged, and calloused into your identity. And so, as the sky darkens and the day cools ever so slightly, you stretch your aching back, roll your stiff shoulder, and reach for the last project of the evening. A simple bracket. Quick work. Probably. You chuckle under your breath. You can't move like you used to, but you can still swing. The rain stopped, the sky is low and bruised, and the fields smell like wet hay. It's the kind of evening where, if you squint and ignore the blisters on your palms, you might almost call it peaceful. You lean on the doorway of your forge, half covered in soot, and look across the muddy road where a farmer is wrestling with a sack of grain and a stubborn goat. You smile. Not because it's funny, though it is, but because for once, you're not the one doing the wrestling. And in a strange way, that's the comfort you've come to recognize. No matter how hard blacksmithing is, it might still be better than farming. Because farming? That's waking up even earlier, dealing with crops that die if the sky's in a bad mood, animals that bite, tools that break and end up on your bench, and a constant hope that the bugs don't win this year. You have your forge, your fire, your tools, your noise. It's brutal, yes, but predictable. Iron doesn't get sick. It doesn't wander off. It doesn't need to be milked. You've overheard farmers complaining at the tavern. My wheat's too wet. My ox threw a shoe. There's mold in the barley. One even said, you blacksmiths have it easy. All you do is hit things. You almost responded. Almost. But then you remembered, that same farmer came to you last week begging for a replacement hoe blade before the moon rises. So you just smiled and kept sipping your slightly burnt cider. Still, you've had moments of doubt. After a long day, wrists aching, lungs full of ash, you've looked at a freshly planted field and thought, at least it's quiet. At least the dirt doesn't bite back. But then you remember harvest season. You remember how farmers smell in August. You remember how many of them are missing teeth. And you go back to your forge. It's a strange thing, this unspoken rivalry between the trades. Everyone claims everyone else has it easier. The carpenter says you don't understand precision. The tanner says you've never smelled real suffering. The preacher says you work too loudly, and the cooper once accused you of overshoeing his cart like it was a horse. But the truth is, everyone's tired. Everyone's sore. Everyone thinks someone else has it better. That's how colonial life works. You survive by believing the next job over might have been slightly less terrible. Even among blacksmiths, there's disagreement. Farriers, those who shoe horses exclusively, think General Smiths like you are too distracted. Blade makers think you're not artistic enough. Tool makers think you're messy. And you think everyone else doesn't understand how to keep a fire from betraying you at the worst possible moment. Historians like to say that tradesmen in colonial America formed tight, supportive communities. Maybe they did. Or maybe they just complained in the same room. You step back inside. The fire is still glowing, low, but steady. The forge is warm, your hands are still blackened, and you still have dirt under your nails you'll probably carry to the grave. But you know how to shape iron. You know how to make something last. And if that isn't a kind of wealth, you're not sure what is. The forge is quiet now. Not dead, just resting, like an animal that's finally stopped pacing. The coals glow soft orange, the bellows hang still, and your hammer sits exactly where you left it. You stretch your fingers slowly. They don't quite uncurl the way they used to, but they're still yours. You're done for the day. Or as close to done as you'll ever be. You hang your apron, stiff, cracked, and still faintly steaming, on the hook near the door. Your boots thump across the dirt floor with the weight of someone who stood too long on the same square of earth. You've been here so long that the stones seem molded to your heels. You wonder if the shop will miss you, if it'll sigh when you're gone. But not yet. You grab a bench and settle just outside the doorway, arms on your knees, soot still smudged along your brow. The night is cool, the air heavy with damp wood and warm metal. You hear frogs by the creek, crickets chirping in the grass. For once, no one's yelling about a plow. You think about how long it's been since you had a full night of sleep. The kind that doesn't end with your shoulders twitching or your brain whispering, you forgot to check the tongs. You haven't slept deep in weeks, maybe months. But somehow, you've kept going. Because in a town like this, being the blacksmith isn't just a job. It's a post, a burden, a kind of quiet oath. You keep people moving. You keep wheels turning, doors closing, gates opening. You hold the hinge between falling apart and holding together. And no one thanks you with coins, really. But they know. That's why they bring you pies on holidays. Why they knock gently when it's late. Why the mayor's wife once left a candle at your door after your anvil cracked. They don't say much, but they know. And you dream in iron now. Not stories, not people, just the rhythm of the forge. The color of heated metal, the clang that rings truest. In your dreams, everything glows. Historians still debate whether blacksmiths like you were truly respected or merely tolerated. Whether your shop was a pillar of community life or simply the loudest building near the mill. But you know better. They came to you when things broke. They left with something whole. And that was enough. You take one last breath of night air, the edge of it cool against your soot-lined throat. Inside, the coals whisper and fade. Outside, the world creaks gently into place. You rise. Slowly. Heavily. You don't need sleep to rest. But you wouldn't mind it. And now, the forge goes quiet in your mind too. The heat fades, the hammer lowers, and even the thoughts that once clanged like metal begin to soften. You're no longer shaping iron. You're drifting, slowly, gently, into a space without weight, without motion. Just the steady hush of nighttime settling around you. Your hands, though tired, finally relax. The aches in your shoulders begin to let go. The world outside the shop door stretches wide and still, like the sky holding its breath. No more wagon wheels to mend. No more hinges to file. Just you, here, in the glow of memory and rest. Let the sounds of the forge fade into the background now. Let your breath slow. Let your limbs sink into softness. There's nothing left to fix tonight. You did enough. You are enough. Sleep, old blacksmith. You've earned it.